And joining us now, Chief Congressional Correspondent Nancy Cortez and Ed O'Keefe, congressional reporter for the Washington Post and CBS News contributor. Both are on Capitol Hill. Okay, Nancy, Republicans have a lot on their agenda. How do you think this feud is going to impact GOP's push for tax cuts?
Well, it certainly gets them off message, but that's a concern that they have already. They worry that some of the president's messages on tax reform have not been the same as their messages, particularly when it comes to how you pay for tax reform. And sorry, I'm just turning around, but I heard reporters here shouting some questions, so I wanted to see who was behind me. The president himself walked into the meeting just a few moments ago with the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, and it is certain to be a tense meeting because even if this feud between the president and Senator Bob Corker doesn't come up, everyone knows that it's there. Everyone knows about what Corker has said about the president just today, calling him essentially a habitual liar who has failed to rise to the occasion as president and who is debasing the nation. By far his harshest criticism yet.
And Ed, as Nancy said, Corker calling him a habitual liar. He also said the president was untruthful, as you mentioned, and unable to rise to the occasion as leader. So is he alone, or are there other Republican senators who feel the same way?
Oh, they definitely do, Rena. Nancy and I could recount several conversations we've had with Republicans over the past year where they've expressed similar concerns. They just don't do it on camera. They don't do it over Twitter. They certainly don't do it as publicly. The difference, of course, remember, Bob Corker has announced he will not be seeking another term as senator from Tennessee, so he feels he's got a little more freedom, perhaps, to speak his mind. And we know that he's channeling his colleagues. Who they are exactly, how many of them are there, I think that depends on the subject and perhaps the day of the week, frankly. But we know from months of reporting that there are several concerns across the Senate and House Republican conferences about the president's behavior, be it on foreign affairs, be it on this issue of taxes, be it on the way he handled the health care debate that fell apart last month. Widespread concerns about this. What will be interesting, frankly, is whether anyone else feels compelled to stand up today and confront him to his face. Remember, Senator Jeff Flake did that at one point after Trump became the presidential nominee, saying to the president, "I'm the other senator from Arizona, the one that didn't get caught." And ever since then, there's been bad blood either on television or on Twitter between the president and the junior senator from Arizona. So if anyone else stands up today or tries to confront the president to his face, they can expect a treatment similar to what Flake and Corker have experienced over the past year.
Nancy, isn't this why folks voted for the president in the first place, to drain the swamp, get rid of these folks, maybe the establishment Republicans? Can you remind us also, Nancy, where we are on ironing out the tax reform plan as well?
Well, the tax reform plan is still being crafted, so there are a lot of details we still don't know. We don't know exactly how many tax brackets there will be on the individual side. Republicans have been talking about 3, talking about 4. We don't know who will fit into those various brackets. We don't know how Republicans plan to pay for these very significant cuts that they want to impose both on the individual side and on the corporate side. And they are really struggling, Rena, as Ed can tell you, to figure out the best ways to pay for their tax cuts, because a lot of ideas that have been floated, closing this loophole, getting rid of that deduction, have been met by immediate opposition from within their own party and sometimes from the president himself. One of their most recent ideas, for example, was to cap the amount that people could put in their 401ks every year. Well, the president himself came out on Twitter yesterday and said, nobody's touching your 401k. It's a very popular program. And that may be true, but every tax advantage is popular, and Republicans are going to need to go after some of them, or this plan is just going to be a bank buster. And they are trying to make the case that they're being fiscally responsible here and that their tax cuts are going to spur growth. But if the price tag ends up being $4, $5, $6 trillion, then you are going to have some fiscal conservatives like Bob Corker who say that it's just not fiscally responsible. And that's what started this whole war of words between Corker and the president in the first place, is that Corker has been very vocal about the fact that he can't get on board with tax reform if Republicans aren't fiscally responsible in the way they go about it.
Yeah, I want to play for you guys a bit of sound. This comes from Paul Ryan this morning, his response to this entire feud within the GOP.
At the end of the day, I know Bob well. Bob's going to vote for Tennessee. He's going to vote for America. He's going to vote for tax reform because he knows it's in the best interest of Americans. So put this Twitter dispute aside. The fact is we have a historic chance of actually fixing this tax code, giving people pay raises, and getting the American economy growing at the rate where we can actually get bigger paychecks, more take-home pay, a healthier economy. That's what matters. So all this stuff you see on a daily basis on Twitter this and Twitter that, forget about it. Let's focus on helping people, improving people's lives, and doing the things that we said we would do that accomplishes that. That's what we're focused on.
Eddie sounds a bit frustrated. As Nancy mentioned, tax cuts come with a cost. You've got to pick and choose. What if congressional leaders can't pass tax cuts this year? What does that mean?
It means they should look for another line of work, Rena, because they may very well lose their jobs next year. They understand right now that failure to pass tax reform, even a modest tax cut, could cause an existential crisis for the Republican Party. You're in control of the White House and both chambers of Congress. You vowed to undo the current health care system and revamp the tax code. If they're unable to do any of that, you're going to see numbers head south for Republican approval overall. On the generic ballot of would you prefer a Republican or Democratic member of Congress representing you, it'll be crisis mode for the Republican Party, which is why the steps that were taken in the last few days to get a budget resolution through to allow the process of writing a tax bill come together are seen as really encouraging for Republicans who know now that as long as they get over that hurdle, as the House is expected to later this week, they'll be able to start writing something that Republican leaders would like to pass before Thanksgiving, but may slip into December. Either way, the hope is to do it by the end of the year. They know that the longer this issue festers, the longer there is time to review the details of the proposals, whether it's about 401k plans or dropping the exemptions for your state and local taxes or some other closed loophole, it's going to create opposition within their own ranks and cause this potentially to slip away.
Well, we've run out of time. I want to ask you guys about health care, but before you go, Nancy, I want to ask you about that protester who interrupted the president's arrival on Capitol Hill. We saw it at the top of the hour. What did you see? Do we know who that was?
I was just a few feet away from him. His name is Ryan Clayton. He's with a group that he calls Americans Take Action, and he was able to get within feet of the president and throw a handful of miniature Russian flags in his way as the president entered the Capitol and headed into his luncheon with Republicans. Very unusual to see a protester be able to get that close to the president, but this is the same man who threw a large Russian flag in the way of Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, back in July when he was here on Capitol Hill to meet with Senate intelligence investigators. In both cases, he appeared to just camouflage himself essentially by showing up in a big group of reporters so he didn't attract any attention, and then stepping out of that group right when the president and when his son-in-law came into the frame and was led away after this incident by police after shouting "Trump is treason."
Yeah, he showed up in a suit too, kind of surprised all of us there. Nancy Cortez, Ed O'Keefe, thank you both for joining us.
You're welcome.
Take care.